The sun was already setting when I noticed the GPS signal on my yacht start moving away from the marina, way faster than it should have been. Confused, I checked the security feed, and my jaw hit the floor. There, on my private yacht, was an entire wedding reception in full swing. Tables, flowers, a live band. A whole crowd of strangers laughing and drinking champagne like they owned the place, led by none other than the queen of HOA Karens herself, and she had no idea what kind of storm she had just invited onto that yacht. You ever wonder what happens when you pick a fight with someone who owns the ocean? It started like any other Saturday. I had just finished my second espresso, the kind you sip on a balcony overlooking the private marina you paid a small fortune to own a slip in. The morning sun glanced off the water like molten silver, and my yacht, the Blue Ember, should have been right there, a shining 45-foot beacon of everything I had worked for. Except when I glanced up for my coffee, something felt wrong. A splinter of unease prickled the back of my neck. I stood, slowly setting down my cup, narrowing my eyes at the familiar row of yachts bobbing gently at their docks. There was an empty space where the Blue Ember should have been. I blinked once, twice, and then grabbed my phone, thumbing open the GPS tracker app installed in my security system. The map took a second to load, and when it did, my heart skipped a beat. My yacht wasn't at the marina. It was moving, several knots out, drifting farther into open waters by the second. For a split second, I wondered if it had been stolen. Pirates? Hijackers? It didn't make any sense. No alarms triggered, no forced entry notices. That's when I remembered the onboard security cameras. I swiped over to the live feed, pulse hammering against my ribs like a war drum. The screen blinked to life, and I froze. My yacht, my private sanctuary, was packed to the rails with strangers. Tables with white linens lined the deck. Golden centerpieces glittered under canopies of twinkle lights. A full band played near the stern, saxophones crooning out some jazzy nightmare of celebration. And there, standing at the bow like some delusional queen, was none other than Karen Bellwether, the HOA president who had made my life miserable since the day I moved into this gated community. She stood with a microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other, barking into the mic about how community spirit knows no bounds, and how neighbors should always share their blessings. I stared at the screen, dumbfounded. There were people everywhere, laughing, dancing, drinking, even letting their kids run wild across my teak deck. Some guy in a cheap tuxedo was dragging my designer loungers across the bow to make room for more tables. I watched, horrified, as a woman in a puffy white wedding dress appeared at the center of the crowd, her face flushed with happiness. Confetti cannons exploded, showering my yacht with glitter. The band shifted into some loud poppy tune as the crowd cheered. Karen lifted her champagne glass higher, her voice booming through the yacht's speakers, and a very special thanks to our gracious donor who made this all possible by providing his lovely vessel for today's celebration. Gracious donor, my blood turned to ice. I never gave permission for any of this. I never even got a phone call. My yacht wasn't some public park or HOA clubhouse. It was my property. Purchased, insured, registered, protected, and now it was hijacked by 100 strangers treating it like a floating banquet hall. I sat there for a long moment, the phone trembling slightly in my hand. Anger burned a hole in my gut so deep it felt like I could swallow the sun. How the hell did they even get access? I scanned the feed again, picking up on small, infuriating details. Karen had banners strung across the upper decks, reading, "Oak Harbor HOA welcomes you." She had commandeered my yacht in broad daylight, parked it off the shore, and somehow spun the narrative that it was a community event sanctioned by the Homeowners Association. I fumbled for my marina access log. Sure enough, there was a record from this morning. Special event access, authorized by HOA President Karen Bellwether. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might shatter. She had falsified authorization documents, lied to the marina staff, used her title like some medieval writ of ownership to waltz onto my private vessel with a wedding party in tow. And now she was out there, smiling, soaking in the applause, basking in the attention like a pig wallowing in filth. I scrolled through the camera feeds, flipping between decks. My blood pressure rose with every tap. Guests piling shrimp cocktail towers onto my teak tables. Someone dropping a full tray of red wine onto my imported cushions. Kids with sticky hands wiping cake frosting onto the polished mahogany rails. The professional photographer Karen had hired was setting up a massive photo shoot using my yacht as the backdrop. Without permission, without even basic decency. Every corner of Blue Ember was crawling with freeloaders, each one another insult to the sweat, time, and millions I had poured into making that yacht perfect. The absurdity of it hit me like a rogue wave. This wasn't just theft. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a declaration of war. Karen had decided that because she presided over a subdivision of cookie-cutter houses and trimmed hedges, she somehow had the right to commandeer a luxury yacht for her grandiose spectacle. No permission. No rental agreement. No respect. My nostrils flared as I imagined Karen's smug little laugh when she bragged to her book club about how she organized a wedding on the water for free. My hands curled into fists. Not because I was helpless, because I wasn't. Because they had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't some scared suburban pushover worried about neighborhood gossip. I was a man who had built businesses, navigated international law, negotiated contracts in boardrooms where people smiled to your face and stabbed you in the back the second you blinked. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to threaten. I needed to act. Cold. Calculated. Surgical. I lowered the phone, my mind already racing ahead, constructing the architecture of revenge the same way I'd build an offshore acquisition, brick by brick, line by line, until the entire structure came crashing down on the fools who thought they could play in my world. I opened the yacht's secondary systems panel through the app, glancing over the maintenance diagnostics. All systems nominal, engines at low idle. GPS coordinates steadily moving farther from the coastline. I checked the distance. 3 nautical miles already. Good. That meant they were well outside the easy swimming zone. I shifted to the autopilot interface, a wicked grin starting to curl at the corner of my mouth. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to call the police, not yet. I was going to make this personal. I was going to make it unforgettable. And it would start with letting Karen and her merry band of suburban pirates drift just a little farther out into the deep, dark blue where the land disappeared, the cell service died, and the real owners of the ocean, wind, current, time, took over. All it would take was one tap on my screen, one command, one slight adjustment to the yacht's heading to make sure they got the full experience they so clearly deserved. The deep waters beyond the marina weren't just empty. They were rough, unforgiving, unpredictable, perfect. Karen Bellwether had no idea what she had unleashed, but she was about to learn. And so was every single guest who thought they could trample onto my property without consequences. I closed the app, set down my phone, and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. Because revenge, like coffee, is best served scalding hot. The first thing I did after watching the chaos unfold on the live feed was reach for my phone. I wasn't stupid. As much as I wanted to fire off every emergency call possible, I knew the optics mattered. Paper trails, evidence, attempts to resolve peacefully. I called Karen's number first, my thumb slamming the call button so hard I thought I might crack the screen. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Her syrupy voice dripped through the line. "Hi there. This is Karen Bellwether, president of the Oak Harbor Homeowners Association. Leave a message, and remember, a smile is contagious." My smile wasn't contagious. It was lethal. I hung up and immediately texted her instead, typing each word with surgical precision. "Karen, you are trespassing. Remove yourself and your guests from my private yacht immediately, or face legal action." I stared at the screen, willing those 3 little dots to pop up. Nothing. Silence. I forwarded the message again. Still nothing. Fine. I moved on to the marina's event coordinator, a woman named Trish, whose name appeared on the fake authorization log. Dialing her number, I paced the balcony, each step hammering harder against the wooden planks. Trish picked up after 5 rings, her voice high-pitched and distracted. "Hello, this is Trish. Sorry, we're a little busy today with the special event." "Special event?" I interrupted, my voice ice cold. You mean the unauthorized hijacking of my yacht? There was a sharp intake of breath. Oh, sir, we were told. By Karen Bellwether, I snapped. Not the owner. Me. I never authorized anything. You are complicit in trespass and theft if you don't act immediately. A pause, then a nervous, babbling reply. I thought the paperwork was legit. She said she was speaking on your behalf. She had a clipboard. A clipboard. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. As if a clipboard was the golden key to commandeering someone's multi-million-dollar vessel. I cut her off. I want every dock authority aware that the Blue Ember is stolen property until further notice. You will cooperate with the police when I call them, and you will turn over every security recording and authorization sheet you have. Understood? Yes, sir, she squeaked. I hung up. My hands itched to start launching official complaints. But there was one more thread I needed to pull. I sent a formal cease and desist email to the HOA distribution list, CCing the HOA board, Karen, and the marina authorities. Subject line: illegal use of private property. Immediate removal required. I attached screenshots from the live camera feed, GPS tracking data, the marina event log, and a notarized copy of my yacht ownership documents. There would be no he said, she said when this hit court. As I hit send, I flipped back to the security feed. The party was still raging. Worse, it was growing. Another boat had pulled up alongside the Blue Ember, a smaller pontoon boat decked out in streamers and balloons. More guests were climbing aboard, carrying coolers, folding chairs, and cases of cheap beer like they were storming the beaches of Normandy. The camera caught one guy stumbling onto my deck and immediately dropping a massive speaker that cracked the polished wood. I winced, rage bubbling hotter. Over by the main mast, Karen had perched herself on a bar stool like a grotesque carnival queen. She was mid-toast, microphone in one hand, cheap white wine in the other. Today, she crowed, is not just a celebration of love, but of community spirit. And thanks to our neighborhood generosity, we have this beautiful yacht for our gathering. That's what living in Oak Harbor is all about, sharing resources for the good of all. A roar of drunken approval answered her. I slammed my fist into the railing so hard the wood groaned. Sharing resources? Since when did sharing mean breaking and entering? Since when did it mean violating every basic principle of property law? I dialed Karen again. Straight to voicemail, I texted. No response. I emailed. No reply. I posted in the Oak Harbor Community Forum, labeled her actions publicly, demanded immediate withdrawal. Within 5 minutes, the post was removed by a moderator. HOA controlled. Typical. My phone buzzed suddenly, an incoming call. For one precious second, I thought Karen had finally realized the storm she had kicked up. But it wasn't Karen. It was her little stooge, Greg Mullins, vice president of the HOA and longtime professional toady. I answered with a growl. Greg. His voice was oiled and fake. Hey there, buddy. Just wanted to smooth things over. We understand you're a little upset about the event. Totally get it. Miscommunication happens. Miscommunication? I barked. You're trespassing. You're vandalizing my property. You're exposing yourselves and others to liability under federal maritime law. Get off my yacht now, Greg chuckled. The kind of condescending chuckle that tells you someone thinks you're too stupid to understand how the world works. Now, no need to escalate things. Karen explained it perfectly. The yacht's part of the community amenities. It's all covered under the Oak Harbor Community Sharing Initiative. There is no such initiative, I said, voice dropping into a snarl. You made it up, he chuckled again. Buddy, we voted on it in a subcommittee meeting last month. New provisions allow temporary use of private properties deemed beneficial to community morale. It's all very democratic. I stared at the phone, stunned. Democratic. As if 3 clipboard-waving Karens could suddenly override ownership rights through sheer audacity. As if a subcommittee of deluded busybodies could magically appropriate my yacht like it was a folding chair from the clubhouse. Greg prattled on. Look, why don't you come on down? Have a drink. Karen said you're more than welcome. We'll even make a toast in your honor. I hung up without a word. Another buzz. A text, this time. From Karen herself. It was a selfie, her and the bride, grinning on my yacht, champagne glasses raised high, and underneath it the caption, "Thanks for supporting your community. You should be honored." My vision blurred with fury. Honored. They thought this was a joke. They thought I was some rich absentee idiot who would just shrug and move on. Another notification popped up before I could crush the phone in my fist. A message from the Oak Harbor HOA Facebook page. Reminder: Blue Ember celebration continues through sunset. Fireworks show at 8 p.m. Bring your friends. Fireworks. On my yacht. With illegal guests, no permits, and zero fire safety precautions. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was a goddamn ticking time bomb. I opened the security feed again and watched as more boats approached, ferrying in even more partygoers. I counted at least 50 new arrivals, all dressed to the nines, all laughing, all oblivious. Plates of food littered the decks, cigarette butts mashed into the deck rails. Someone had the gall to set up a makeshift dance floor over the freshly waxed teak. Karen paraded around the deck, still shouting into the mic, her voice carrying across the ocean. "Don't worry, everyone. If the owner shows up, we'll just explain it's for the good of the neighborhood. He'll understand once he sees the smiles." I leaned against the railing of my balcony, the salt air whipping around me, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Smiles. Community. Sharing. It wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was a full-fledged cult mentality. The worst part wasn't even the trespassing. It was the absolute certainty they all had that there would be no consequences. That I would take it. That I would surrender. I closed the security app, slid the phone into my pocket, and stared out at the distant speck of my yacht bobbing farther into the shimmering, endless blue. They thought they were celebrating. They thought they had won. They had no idea they were drifting farther and farther from shore, farther from cell service, farther from rescue, farther from the protection of the land they thought would shield them. They had no idea that the ocean wasn't governed by HOA committees. It was governed by current, wind, and men who understood that law and revenge often wore the same uniform. I turned on my heel, calm now, colder than the steel hull of the yacht they had stolen. I had given them every chance to do the right thing. Every out. Every opportunity to escape this storm brewing over the horizon. They refused. They chose escalation. Now I would answer in kind. And by the time I was done, Karen Bellwether and her kingdom of fools would wish they had never set foot on my ship, never touched my rails, never stolen a single breath of my salt-soaked air. They thought they were throwing a wedding. I was about to throw them a wake. The trick with revenge is patience. You don't strike when you're angry. You don't strike when you're hurt. You strike when you are ice, when your pulse slows to a crawl, when your thoughts slice cleanly through the chaos like a scalpel. That's when you do the most damage. I stood on the balcony for a long time after that last text from Karen, letting the ocean wind strip away the last remnants of rage until only a sharp, clinical precision remained. Then I moved. No flailing. No threats. No wasted energy. I pulled open the marine control app tied to the Blue Ember's onboard systems, tapping into the secondary menu I rarely used except during maintenance or storm procedures. Deep within the system was the hidden ace I'd installed after commissioning the yacht, the remote disengagement protocol. Designed to allow an emergency slip release in case of fire or flood, it could be triggered remotely if you knew the exact sequence of override codes. I had written them myself. One wrong move, and the system would lock down, alerting marina security. But with the right touch, silent, seamless disengagement. No alarms, no sirens. Just a quiet severing of the invisible leash tethering the yacht to civilization. I entered the code slowly, triple-checking each digit. A soft vibration hummed through the app, followed by the words, "Slip, lock, disengaged." I closed my eyes for a second, imagining the scene unfolding. Beneath the partying guests' feet, deep in the marina infrastructure, the slip's magnetic lock released with a dull metallic click. The yacht, unmoored, now bobbed freely, its slight movements masked by the natural sway of the ocean. To anyone on board, it would feel no different than before. Just another gentle roll in the evening tide. Perfect. I thumbed open the GPS tracker next. The Blue Ember was already drifting at a lazy 2 knots. Not much, barely noticeable. But the deeper you go into the open sea, the stronger the current pulls. I tapped into the autopilot interface, rerouting the system from docked to manual override. The interface shifted, giving me full command. The yacht's heading blinked at me. 145 degrees southeast, straight into open water. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. I adjusted the heading slightly, just a few degrees off-center to keep them slowly drifting farther from any casual shoreline rescue. It would take hours before they even realized they were too far from land. I zoomed out on the GPS map, setting waypoints at 5-mile increments, each one a little deeper, a little wilder, a little lonelier. I wasn't sending them into the jaws of death. I wasn't a monster. But I was sending a message. Respect property, or find yourself in a place where no one hears you scream. I checked the onboard cameras again. The wedding was in full swing now, every inch of the deck packed with laughing guests. The bride and groom twirled clumsily near the stern, their dance wobbling slightly with the yacht's movement. The band played on, oblivious, their brass notes drifting into the evening like seagulls wheeling over carcasses. Karen held court near the helm, her champagne flute perpetually full, her laughter sharper than a gull's cry. No one noticed the missing skyline behind them. No one noticed that the dock was no longer within sight. No one noticed the way the waves had started to roll a little higher, the way the salt air tasted a little wilder. I waited and watched. Timing was everything. If I acted too soon, they might suspect, might call the marina, might get a tow. But if I let them sink just a little deeper into their drunken celebration, if I let their false sense of security blossom fully, then, when the moment came, they would have no defense. I texted my dockmaster friend Jake, whose loyalty I had secured years ago with a generous bonus. Initiate radio silence on Blue Ember. She's having technical difficulties tonight. His reply came almost instantly. Understood. Radio blacked out for maintenance. Now, even if Karen or her guests realized they were adrift, their frantic radio calls would be met with nothing but static. I set the yacht's internal sound system to party mode remotely, locking it on maximum volume for the next 3 hours. Even if someone tried to shut off the music to listen to an emergency signal, they wouldn't be able to. Karen had made sure the band and DJ were wired into the main system, running everything at full blast, effectively muting any external communication. I made a few more adjustments, tightening the system's safety parameters. Life jackets in the storage lockers, water rations stocked. No real danger, just isolation, just panic, just poetic justice. I spent the next 30 minutes assembling a small strike kit, waterproof dry bag, satellite phone, a first aid kit just in case, extra rope, my legal documentation folders, and a pair of industrial-strength noise-canceling headphones for when I had to deal with their inevitable whining. I strapped the dry bag to the back of my 30-foot motorboat, Ironwake, a sleek, fast beauty equipped with twin outboards and long-range fuel tanks. She was built for open waters, designed to slice through the waves like a knife through silk. I prepped Ironwake methodically, checking every bolt, every valve, every emergency beacon. This wasn't some petty high school prank. This was a surgical operation. This was war, fought with precision, foresight, and complete legal cover. As night crept in and the marina lights blinked on behind me, I rolled Ironwake into the service slip, out of sight from the main party traffic. No one noticed. They were too busy uploading photos of themselves to Instagram, tagging my stolen yacht as if it was just another rentable backdrop for their vapid celebrations. I scrolled through some of the posts, my jaw tightening. Blessed yacht life, community love, best wedding ever. Every tag was a nail in their coffin. Every selfie was a signature on their own public shaming. They documented their crimes with the giddy carelessness of children. And I was saving every one. Evidence folder. Time stamped. Geo-tagged. Immaculate. I sipped another espresso from a travel mug, the bitterness soothing the edges of my smirk. Across the marina, the distant outline of the Blue Ember had grown smaller against the inky black sea. Their music floated over the water, faint but shrill. They still hadn't noticed. They were too drunk on cheap champagne and self-righteousness to realize that the land had disappeared hours ago, swallowed by the endless blue. Karen's voice, distorted and faint, crackled over the final camera feed. Let's make a toast to community, to generosity, to showing the world how Oak Harbor knows how to celebrate. A raucous cheer erupted. Champagne flutes clinked, flashbulbs exploded. And beneath it all, the gentle whisper of the tide, pulling them farther from shore, dragging them into the deep with a patience as cold and relentless as mine. I pocketed my phone, checked the dry bag one last time, and slid into the captain's seat of the Ironwake. The engines purred to life, smooth and hungry. I set course toward the drifting blip on my GPS screen, the glowing, oblivious dot labeled Blue Ember. In the distance, beyond the last outposts of the marina lights, the world dropped away into an ocean of darkness, endless and sovereign. Out there, no HOA charter held power. Out there, no clipboard queen could declare dominion. Out there, it was just them, the sea, and me. I throttled forward, slicing across the black water like a ghost. Vengeance didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to be violent. It just needed to be inevitable. And it was. The first sign that something was wrong didn't come with a crash or a scream. It came with a murmur, a ripple of unease that passed through the crowd like a cold gust of wind on a summer day. One by one, heads turned toward the horizon, squinting into the falling dusk. The shoreline, once a comforting smear of lights and houses, had vanished. In its place stretched nothing but endless darkening water, heaving gently beneath the blood-red sky. Cell phones came out, their tiny screens glowing like desperate fireflies. Karen stood near the center of the deck, laughing a little too loudly, wine glass still in hand, oblivious. A few of her loyal sycophants clustered around her, forcing stiff smiles. But further out, at the edges of the gathering, the whispers started. People tried to pull up GPS maps and saw only blank screens or the dreaded spinning wheel of no service. Someone tried to call an Uber boat and got nothing but a dead signal. The more tech-savvy among them tried to ping their locations, only to realize with mounting dread that they were well past any shallow marina zone. My yacht, the Blue Ember, floated like a ghost, detached from the world. The party lights strung along the rails now looking less like decorations and more like the faint, mocking glow of a life raft adrift in open ocean. I watched it all from the helm of my motorboat, Ironwake, keeping a steady pace a mile or so behind them. Just close enough to see, just far enough to remain invisible against the growing dark. The ocean air had changed. It wasn't the soft, salty breeze of a marina anymore. It was heavier, cooler, carrying with it the sharp tang of deeper waters. The yacht rocked a little more now, the waves no longer cushioned by the sheltered coves of the shoreline. Dresses fluttered against legs. Drinks spilled unnoticed. Plates slid an inch or two across the buffet tables. A low buzz of discontent began to hum through the crowd. Karen's voice rang out, brittle and shrill against the night air. "Everyone, calm down! It's just a little drift! Nothing to worry about!" She clapped her hands as if commanding a dog, her forced cheer wobbling at the edges. "We're still anchored near the coast. It's a party, not a prison." But even as she said it, even as she tried to pour another drink and rally the crowd, the truth was setting in. There was no anchor line, no mooring rope, no reassuring sight of bobbing dock pylons or harbor lights. There was only the slow, inexorable motion of the sea, pulling them farther and farther from anything familiar. A toddler began crying somewhere near the stern. The bride and groom, who had been slow dancing a few minutes ago, now stood frozen near the rail, peering out into the gloom. The band faltered mid-song, uncertain whether to keep playing or pack up their instruments. Karen stalked toward the helm, heels clicking sharply on the wet deck. She shoved aside a cluster of tipsy guests who had started huddling near the lifeboats, trying to reassure themselves that everything was fine. She grabbed the wheel of the yacht like she was seizing control of a runaway shopping cart, barking orders into thin air. "We just need to turn it around. Who's got boating experience? Come on, somebody." There were a few shrugs, a few blank stares. Most of her guests were suburban warriors, more skilled with lawn mowers and HOA regulations than actual seamanship. Finally, some 20-something kid in a wrinkled button-down raised his hand sheepishly. I played Sea of Thieves on Xbox? Karen latched onto him like a drowning woman onto driftwood. Perfect! Get over here and help me! The kid hesitated, glanced at the dark water beyond the rail, then stumbled over. I almost pitied him. Almost. From the iron wake, I watched them fumble at the controls like children trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. They pressed buttons, turned dials, flipped switches at random, achieving nothing except turning off the party lights and triggering a low, eerie alarm that sent several guests into near hysterics. Someone shouted that they should call the Coast Guard. Someone else yelled about suing Karen for endangerment. The careful social fabric of the wedding party was unraveling with every gust of salty wind, every rising swell that made the yacht tilt just a little harder than before. Sunset melted into true night now, the sky going from purple to black. Stars exploded overhead, uncaring and cold. The moon climbed higher, painting the deck in a pale, ghastly light. My yacht, my beautiful blue ember, now looked less like a party boat and more like a ghost ship. Lost and alone in the vast cradle of the sea, fear spread like wildfire. Some guests began gathering their things, clutching purses, wrapping themselves in jackets. Several tried to wave their phones high in the air, desperate for a signal. Others simply sat down heavily on the deck, stunned into silence by the sheer scale of their mistake. Karen, to her credit, didn't break immediately. She barked orders, commanded them to stay positive, insisted that the marina staff would notice and come to tow them back any minute. But even she couldn't ignore the growing reality. No one was coming. No flashing rescue lights on the horizon. No comforting rumble of Coast Guard cutters. Just the endless lapping of the waves and the whisper of panic rising in every throat. I checked my GPS tracker again. 5 miles out now, right on schedule. I adjusted Ironwake's course slightly, keeping them in view but still hidden by the natural folds of the ocean swells. I wasn't ready to reveal myself yet. Not until the fear matured into full-bloom terror. Not until Karen, queen of the HOA, self-proclaimed ruler of Oak Harbor, realized just how small and powerless she truly was out here. A loud crash echoed across the water. One of the catering tables had tipped over, sending glassware and food skidding across the deck. Several guests screamed. Others backed away from the railing, suddenly aware of how close they were to the open ocean. Someone slipped and fell hard, their cry sharp against the night. Karen's voice cracked as she grabbed a mic again. "Everyone calm down, we're fine, we're fine." Her voice wavered on the second fine. She knew, even if she hadn't said it out loud yet. She had lost control. Entirely, irrevocably. And as that realization curdled inside her, she did what people like her always do when the mask slips. She lashed out. "This isn't my fault!" she shrieked. "It's the owner's fault. He abandoned us. He's responsible for this mess," some of the guests muttered in agreement, desperate for a scapegoat. Others shook their heads, disgusted, finally seeing through the paper-thin facade of Karen's leadership. Alliances shattered like glass in the dark. I throttled Ironwake slightly faster, feeling the boat hum under me, a predator approaching wounded prey. The sea wasn't violent tonight. No storm clouds, no towering swells. Just the slow, ceaseless rhythm of deep water, the kind that doesn't kill you quickly, the kind that just wears you down, sip by sip, until you break. On the security feed, I watched as a cluster of guests finally realized they couldn't fake their way out of this anymore. They began pulling life jackets from the storage bins. They huddled in small, miserable groups, their fancy wedding attire soaked in sweat and salt air, their smiles long gone. Even the band had stopped playing, their instruments abandoned on the deck like corpses after a battlefield rout. I let them sit in that fear for a while longer, let them stew in it. Let the slow, corrosive horror of their situation sink deep into their bones. Then, and only then, when the fear was ripe, would I reveal myself. I leaned forward over the steering console of Ironwake, the moonlight casting a sharp glint off the metal hardware, my face set like carved stone. Out here, there was no HOA, no marina security, no suburban bureaucracy. Out here, there was only ownership, consequences, and the ancient, unbreakable laws of the sea. And tonight, those laws wore my face. I throttled up another notch, the twin engines snarling softly as I tore through the dark water, a silent bullet slicing toward the drifting wreck of Karen's doomed empire. The moon hung heavy and full, its cold light painting the waves in sharp silver slashes as I closed the final distance. Iron wake carved through the water like a blade, engines low and steady, the sea splitting in my wake. As I drew closer, the blue ember loomed ahead, her lights flickering like a wounded animal's heartbeat. The yacht rocked harder now, a captive to the ocean's slow wrath, her party decorations drooping and torn, her once proud deck littered with overturned chairs, abandoned shoes, and shattered glass. I killed the engines 50 yards out, letting the natural momentum carry me the rest of the way, silent as a ghost. From my new vantage, I could see everything. Karen, standing at the bow, face pinched and furious, her hair whipped into a frenzy by the rising wind. Clusters of guests clinging together in soaked tuxedos and ruined dresses, their high society polish stripped away to raw panic and confusion. The bride was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers, the groom awkwardly patting her back as he glanced overboard like he was considering jumping for it. And all of it, every inch of that pitiful disaster, was mine to command. I reached into the dry bag at my feet and pulled out the heavy-duty loudspeaker system I'd prepared. I flicked it on, adjusted the frequency to the yacht's primary sound channel, and keyed the mic. The speakers aboard Blue Ember squealed to life, feedback shrieking across the night. Every head snapped toward the sound, toward me. I let the silence stretch a few heartbeats longer, savoring the moment, before speaking in a voice colder than the water below them. "Attention, trespassers," I said, the words carrying across the ocean with mechanical authority. "You are currently aboard a privately owned vessel without permission. Your unauthorized entry constitutes criminal trespass, theft of property, and multiple violations of maritime law." Screams and shouts broke out across the deck. Karen spun in place, searching the darkness, her wild eyes finally locking onto the shadowy shape of Ironwake floating just offshore. I watched the recognition bloom across her face, followed immediately by sheer, unfiltered terror. I continued, my voice never rising, never wavering. "You are instructed to remain on board. Do not attempt to abandon the vessel. Assistance is en route. Failure to comply will result in additional charges." Another shriek, this one near the stern, as a few idiots tried to fumble the life rafts loose, only to realize they had no idea how to deploy them. One guy even threw a champagne bottle into the water, as if he could somehow float to safety on it. Karen clawed her way to the mic near the main deck controls, jabbing the button so hard I thought she might snap it off. Her voice blared through the yacht's speakers, shrill and cracking. "This is a misunderstanding. We're authorized. This was a community event." I keyed my mic again, slicing through her desperate lies like a knife through wet paper. No authorization was given. No permission was granted. You are now under federal jurisdiction as unauthorized occupants on a registered maritime vessel. The weight of it hit them like a hammer. Federal jurisdiction, not HOA bylaws, not parking violations. Real consequences, real charges. One woman fainted near the buffet table. Another man, clearly drunk, tried to argue, but was quickly silenced when his wife slapped him and dragged him toward the center of the deck, closer to the rest of the terrified group. I watched Karen crumple slightly at the knees, the mic dropping from her hand and clattering onto the deck with a hollow, metallic thud. She knew it was over. But it wasn't just over. It was about to get worse. I glanced down at my satellite phone, thumbed the pre-dialed number, and hit send. 1 ring. 2. Then a calm, professional voice answered. "Coast Guard Sector 2, Officer Riley speaking. I gave my name and registration number, voice clipped and professional. Confirmed visual on unauthorized vessel use. Trespassers still on board. Requesting immediate assistance per prior notification." "Roger that, Mr. Carter," Officer Riley replied. "We have visual on your location. Units inbound. ETA, 3 minutes." I clicked off the call and settled back into the captain's chair, arms crossed, letting the cool night air wash over me. Across the water, the guests shifted uneasily, pointing and shouting as the first set of blue flashing lights appeared on the horizon, growing larger and brighter with each passing second. 2 Coast Guard patrol boats closed in fast, their hulls slicing through the waves with merciless efficiency. Sirens whooped once, short, sharp, commanding, and then cut out, leaving only the pounding of engines and the sobbing of the yacht's unwanted passengers. Bullhorns blared orders in clipped, authoritative tones. "Remain where you are! Do not attempt to flee! You are under investigation for multiple federal violations!" Officers boarded the Blue Ember with the smooth, detached movements of men used to hauling idiots off boats at midnight. No drawn guns, no shouting, just grim, methodical detainment. One by one, the guests were rounded up, their protests and sob stories brushed aside like flies. Several tried to blame Karen immediately, their loyalty disintegrating faster than paper in rain. I heard snippets through the comms. "She said it was allowed. She told us it was part of the HOA rules. We thought it was a free event." Karen, true to her nature, tried to spin the narrative one last time. She cornered one of the Coast Guard officers near the helm, jabbing a manicured finger into his chest. "I'm the HOA president," she screeched. "This is all just a misunderstanding. You don't understand the situation. We're important people." The officer didn't flinch. He simply turned, snapped a pair of cuffs around her wrists, and read her rights in a flat, bored voice. Karen shrieked, writhing against the cuffs, but there was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. As the Coast Guard began ferrying the guests onto their boats, I motored Iron Wake in closer, pulling alongside the battered, humiliated wreck of what had once been my proud yacht. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I simply stared at them, at her, letting the crushing weight of their failure settle fully onto their shoulders. Karen met my gaze for one brief, shattering moment. All the bravado, all the smug entitlement, all the false superiority was gone. In its place was something small, something broken, something that finally understood the price of arrogance. The Coast Guard ferried them back to shore, where waiting police cruisers processed them like cattle at a slaughterhouse. One by one, they were booked, documented, charged, trespassing, theft, violation of maritime law. Some would get off with fines. Some would face real court dates. Karen would face all of it and more, because I wasn't finished with her yet. 2 days later, I filed a civil lawsuit so heavy it made headlines by noon. Damages for unauthorized use of private property, vandalism repairs, emotional distress, violation of maritime safety codes, illegal occupancy, fraudulent misrepresentation to marina authorities. The final bill, $2.3 million. Karen's lawyer, a weasel-faced man with a comb-over and a cheap suit, tried to settle out of court. I refused. I wanted it public. I wanted it documented. I wanted her humiliation to be eternal. A week after the incident, I sat on my balcony once more, coffee steaming in one hand, the morning sun glittering off the water. My yacht, cleaned and restored, bobbed peacefully at its proper mooring, a shining testament to resilience. I sipped slowly, savoring the bitter warmth as my phone buzzed with a news alert. I glanced down and smiled. The headline screamed across the screen. HOA president arrested for unauthorized yacht party, faces multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Beneath it, Karen's mugshot stared back at me. Her hair was a frizzed halo of chaos, her eyes hollow and wide, her mouth set in a broken, stunned line. I leaned back in my chair, letting the ocean breeze wash over me, and exhaled slowly. Justice wasn't always swift. It wasn't always loud. But when delivered correctly, when delivered with patience and precision, it tasted better than anything in the world. I raised my mug in a small, private toast. To consequences, to ownership, to the ocean, and to the undeniable truth that some empires are built on stone, and some, like Karen Bellwether's kingdom of petty tyranny, are built on sand, and it only takes one good tide to wash them away forever.